I've not really listened to his podcast since 2018. But I heard your Wrestling Observer radio episode where he went on his podcast, right? So correct me if I'm wrong here. He went on his podcast and criticized you for, or the newsletter in general, for having Chris Benoit still in the Hall of Fame. But you went through the same process
Whoa. He voted to keep Chris Benoit in, and I voted to put Chris Benoit. I don't know if he said that. I think that might have been Brian Last who was critical, and that's when I thought, yeah, I mean, but Brian probably didn't know that Jim Cornette voted to keep him in. I voted to put him out, but it was basically we used the Baseball Hall of Fame rules. It's like, what are we gonna do? This guy just killed his wife and his son, and he's in the Hall of Fame. What are we gonna do? So it's just like I go, what would happen if this was in a sports Hall of Fame? And baseball, which is the one we copied. It's like you have to have the amount of votes that it takes to put someone in. You have to have that. So it's 60%. You got it 60% say no, and I think it was 53% no. He didn't get the 60% no, and he's in. Now people are always like, do it again. The results will be like then I'd be like breaking the rules. The rules are, you can't go in there and go, who didn't like the result, which I didn't, but I didn't like the result. So I'm going to keep doing it every year until I can, until people are swayed to vote for 60% out. No. And it's just like, whatever. I mean, OJ's in every football Hall of Fame, every single one. And, it's like, and no one says it's like, like this horrible thing about the Hall of Fame. For wrestling, for whatever reason they do. But it's like, that's the precedent. And there wasn't even a big thing with OJ to vote to put him out. I mean, that was the weird part of the whole thing, is it was like, it in wrestling it's weird. Like wrestling's got more a moral compass than football, I guess, or something. In some ways it weirdly, the wrestling fans weirdly, maybe not weirdly is even the word, but in some ways the wrestling fans do, because you'll see stuff transgressions and things like that are routine in college football. And if a wrestler does them, they want to blackballed out of the whole industry, or even so. And sometimes it gets ridiculous because I mean, it's like, there's a lot of political views that I don't agree with. I have my own political views on things, but I would never want somebody blackballed out of a business for having different political views than I do. Now, if they're, I mean, if they commit horrible crimes, yes, I get not wanting to do that. And the old business, you could commit the worst crimes in the world, and Jimmy Snuka, and everyone will book you. And now it would be, I think that if you murdered somebody, it would be a lot more difficult to to be booked by every promotion in the world. Whereas Jimmy Snuka, after the Nancy Argentina thing, he worked everywhere, and it wasn't even an issue that he did.
So when did you have the vote to whether to keep Chris Benoit in or out then? Because I'm assuming it was quite soon after.
It would have been the next Hall. It would have been the Hall of Fame election right after. So that was July. So I guess it would have been probably like September, maybe. So it's a couple months later. Yeah.
So I mean, feelings were as raw as they're ever going to get at that time, and he was still voted to remain in. So I don't know what the idea would be to have it done 15 years later or whatever.
Right. Well, now people are a lot, it's just a different world. And now, I mean, I do believe that if I put a vote in now, he probably would get more than 60% out. But, I mean, it's like, I don't believe in revisiting history. I mean, then it just becomes, I'm trying to get something accomplished now that didn't happen when it should have, so to speak. And look, I read so many different viewpoints on that at the time it happened, with and everything. And it's like, a lot of people don't like to look at the arguments on both sides. There is an argument that this happened due to reasons of insanity, which Vern Gagne did the same thing. Granted, he was, much older, but, and there was obviously, no movement for Vern. And I don't know that I accept that was reasons of insanity. I don't accept that personally, but there are people who do. And because of that, it's like he wouldn't have been convicted because of insanity if it had gone to trial, which I don't know that would have happened. I don't think it would have, but it's an argument, it's an argument that you could go with, especially with what they found in his brain, a year later when they examined his brain. That ended up being, what I say, like that ended up being, a big part of the story later.
It's, I think people generally like to look for the easy answer, and it's one thing, And generally, everything happens for a multitude of reasons.
Yeah. Well, we're going to go to Chris Benoit. I don't think there's one reason, but it's a lot easier to do just the brain injury thing because it's easier to pacify. You know what I mean? Because the other stuff just requires, that gets really, the idea that he smothered and killed his son. That one is just like, you can't. I just can never figure that out. I mean, it's like, what kind of a person would do that? Especially because like a lot of people who were around him and knew him. You had very pleasant social interactions with him, and there were people who were really good friends of him. And then he did something that was pretty, on the standards of heinous and the standards of things that under the worst of circumstances in the world, that's probably right at the top of the list of the things that I can't imagine anyone could. I don't say anyone, but certainly I could never do. I mean, that I just never, at all. So it's kind of like how he could do it. I don't understand how he did that. I just don't.
Do you smell what the Rock is cooking?
Enough is enough! Rudy Poo Candy! Had him writhing in pain with my sharpshooter. Rocky! I am not a nugget!
Stick him straight up your candy ass!
I kicked your leg out of your leg.
The Rock has come back!